One, the breath before birth, before suns burned in their stations. Before the thin lines of hyperspace stretched across the void, there was only the hum, not silence, not sound. The hum of the Force, endless, without edge, without beginning. It flowed in and out of itself like the slow turning of a black ocean. All life that would ever be was already written into it. Yet even within this eternal stillness, something stirred. A gathering of threads, a shape, a shadow in the unborn light. The old records call it the Chosen One. The Jedi claim it as a bringer of balance. The Sith name it as the destroyer of order. I, who have waited in this crystal for 1,000 forgotten cycles, know it as neither. I know it only as a wound in the Force deep enough to bleed across centuries. It began in a place unworthy of prophecy, not in the spires of Coruscant, nor in the temples carved from the bones of forgotten worlds. It began in the dust, a desert of twin suns, where heat lies heavy upon the skin and the night hides little mercy. Tatooine, a wasteland the galaxy barely remembers, except for the suffering it consumes. There, in the shadow of slavery, a boy was born. His name was Anakin. His mother spoke of no father. The other slaves whispered about the strangeness of it, but their lives left no room for questions that could not be answered. The boy was small, and yet his presence made the air feel thicker. Those with the faintest sensitivity to the unseen found themselves looking at him too long, unsure why the Force does not create without purpose. That is what the Jedi teach, yet the Force also deceives. It shapes instruments and leaves them in the paths of those who think themselves masters. Even now, I cannot tell if Anakin was gift or curse, only that the pattern shifted when he entered. The stream in the years of his childhood, chains were his first teachers. Not the steel around his limbs, but the invisible cords of survival, fear, and the need to please the one who owned him. His hands learned machinery, the language of speeders, pods, and droids, before they learned a lightsaber's hilt. His eyes learned the barter and cruelty of the markets before they learned the vast maps of the stars. Still, he dreamed. Children dream without permission, without the weight of reason. His dreams were not of freedom, for that word had no meaning yet. His dreams were of flying to race the winds, to leave the horizon behind. In this, the Force was already whispering. To him, in currents too deep for his mind to hear. But the galaxy was not still. Somewhere beyond the heat storms and slave quarters, the first moves of a greater game had begun. The Sith had already stepped from shadow into the hollow spaces of power. A new war gathered in the cracks of the Republic. A war that would require pawns, a war that would require the right pawn. The Jedi came to Tatooine by chance, or so they thought. They sought parts for their crippled ship, not destiny. And yet, when Qui-Gon Jinn looked upon the boy, he felt the same thickness in the air that the slaves had felt. He tested the boy. He measured his blood for the whispers of life unseen. The numbers were beyond reckoning. The Council's prophecies stirred in their tombs. Anakin's mother was not freed. This was the first cut. The Jedi spoke of patience, of the future, of service to something larger than himself. But the boy carried with him the taste of what he had left behind. This taste would sour. This taste would one day feed his hunger. I have seen the truth of the Force's so-called balance. It is not peace. It is the turning of the blade so that it cuts both edges of time. For light to rise, shadow must deepen. For shadow to be broken, light must bleed. The boy from Tatooine was the edge of that blade. When they left the desert behind, The suns still burned as they had always burned. The moisture farms still pulled water from a reluctant sky. The slaves still wore their chains. Nothing changed, except that the Force had taken its peace from this place and carried it into the current of history. A peace shaped like a child who would grow to split the galaxy in two. Do not think the boy understood any of this. Destiny does not explain itself to its instruments. He knew only that he was going somewhere he had never been, somewhere clean, somewhere high, somewhere with colors and structures beyond the reach of sandstorms. He believed the Jedi were saviors. He did not yet know that they were wardens of a different kind. From here, the pattern moves swiftly, though in his memory it will seem slow. The temple would rise before him like a promise. The council would regard him with wary eyes, already doubting the wisdom of his arrival. And somewhere far beneath the surface of the Republic, in chambers lit by nothing but ambition, a figure cloaked in patience would begin to weave the boy's name into the Sith's design. I speak to you from within this holocron so that you might understand the first breath of all this. Not the roar of battles, not the blaze of sabers, but the quiet moment where the galaxy took in air before the scream. Anakin Skywalker was that breath. In him was the stillness before the storm, the deep calm before the fracture. If you listen closely, you can still hear it. The inhale that has yet to become the exhale. The pause before history chooses its side. And you will know, as I knew, that the breath before birth is never a gentle thing. It is the drawing in of the galaxy's hunger. What came after was only the sound of it feeding. 2 chains of flesh and sand slavery leaves to marks. One upon the body, one upon the mind. The body's chains can be shattered in a moment with key or blade. The mind's chains are older. They are grown into the bone, into the way one sees the world. The boy named Anakin carried both on Tatooine. The heat is a weight. It does not simply burn the skin. It presses into the skull until thought itself feels heavy. In this place, the Hutts and their lesser masters ruled not with armies, but with ownership. Anakin's world was the space between the market stalls, the workshops, and the slave quarters. His days were shaped by tasks assigned by others, his nights by the dull ache of exhaustion. Yet in this narrow life, there were small sparks, a pod racer's engine parts hidden under a tarp, a droid he built from scraps, shaped by hands too small for the tools they held. His mind did not rest. He was always building, always fixing. Perhaps this was the Force already working, the unseen current flowing through his fingers. His mother, Shmi, bore her own chains with quiet strength. She never spoke of the father he had never known. When pressed, she would say only that there was no father. It was the truth, and yet it was not. The truth was greater than the words could hold. The truth was tangled in the Force itself. The boy did not understand what he was. But the Force does not wait for understanding. It simply moves. And so, the first cracks in his prison appeared not by his own will, but by the arrival of strangers. A ship, crippled by damage, landed beyond the city's edge. From it came figures in robes, speaking in the calm tones of those unused to fear. Qui-Gon Jinn walked among the market stalls as one who has seen many worlds and found them all the same. His eyes were keen, his presence solid, and when he looked upon Anakin, the hum of the Force changed. Qui-Gon tested him. Questions, observations, small games meant to measure something invisible. The boy answered without knowing the weight of what he said. He spoke of pad racing, of building machines that should be beyond him, of dreams that felt like more than dreams. Qui-Gon listened as one listens to prophecy spoken by accident. It was not kindness that brought the Jedi to free the boy. It was belief. Belief in an old prophecy, one that spoke of a chosen one, born to bring balance to the Force. Qui-Gon wagered on this belief in the way. Others wager on a throw of the dice. He placed his stake upon the boy's future. The game was dangerous, for the dice had been carved by the Force itself. The bet was won. Anakin's chains were broken, but the breaking was incomplete, for Shmi remained. The rules of the wager did not allow her freedom, and so Anakin stood on the edge of a new life, with half his heart still bound in the old one. This wound would not heal, not in the temple's halls, not in the years to come. The wound would deepen, fed by every separation, every loss. It would one day open wide enough for darkness to pour through. When the boy left Tatooine, the suns were falling toward the horizon. He stood at the ship's ramp and looked back. He did not cry. The desert does not teach its children to cry. But something in his gaze fixed itself on the figure of his mother, growing smaller as the ramp rose. The last image of her burned into him like the heat of the sands. The Jedi saw him as a victory, a rare prize found in the wastes. But the Sith, watching from their hidden places, saw something else. They saw the outline of a weapon, one forged in need, sharpened in loss. They knew the boy's hunger would grow with him. Hunger is a handle. A handle can be gripped, and gripped long enough, it can be turned. This is the truth I have carried through centuries in this holocron. Freedom is never pure. The boy was freed from his master, but not from the truth of having been owned. The galaxy would open to him now, its towers, its temples, its wars. Yet the desert would remain inside him. Every council room he entered, every battlefield he crossed, would be walked with the step of one who has lived under command. And so the Force shifted. The breath that began with his birth now carried into a second inhalation. The kind taken before a storm is called down upon a dry plain. I have seen the storm. I have seen the lightning in the boy's eyes, and I have seen what that lightning will burn. But here he was only a child, stepping from one prison into another. The first prison had chains of iron. The second would have chains of destiny. 3. The silent Council Coruscant was not the desert. It was a city without horizon, built in layers that blotted out the sky. Towers like blades of durasteel rose higher than the tallest dune could dream. The air hummed with endless movement, yet inside the Jedi Temple there was stillness. The boy stepped into that stillness as though into a chamber of judgment. The temple's halls were pale and polished, lit by the filtered glow of the city beyond. Jedi moved in silence, robes brushing stone, their voices measured. They looked at Anakin as one might look at a weapon newly forged, weighing not its beauty, but the danger in its edge. At the heart of the temple sat the council, 12 masters in a circle, each face carrying years of discipline. Yoda, smallest in size, yet largest in presence, spoke first. His gaze pierced not only the boy's eyes, but the currents beneath them. They asked questions about his life, his fears. His mother, he answered honestly, for he did not yet know. That honesty could be used against him. The masters listened without nods, without smiles. The air grew heavy with their verdict before it was spoken. Too old, too fearful, too attached. These were not traits they desired in a Jedi. They saw power in him, yes, but also the shadow that would follow that power. The shadow they feared might consume more than the boy. Qui-Gon stood firm. He spoke of prophecy, of the chosen one who would bring balance to the Force. The Council did not accept this easily. To them, prophecy was a current too deep to sail blindly. Yet the boy's presence had already unsettled their still waters. Then death moved faster than their deliberation. On Naboo, a Sith revealed himself after 1,000 years of absence. Qui-Gon Jinn fell to the Crimson Blade. In his final breath, he charged Obi-Wan with training the boy. Obi-Wan obeyed, though his heart was not yet certain. Duty bound him more tightly than belief. An apprentice should be taken with trust, but here was a bond forged in a dying man's will. The Force itself seemed to push them together, not with gentle guidance, but with the inevitability of a closing door. The Council allowed it. Perhaps they hoped control would tame the boy's fire. Perhaps they feared to waste a weapon in times such as these. Perhaps they simply did not see the deeper thread. I tell you now, the Force is not moved by permission. Anakin's training began under the shadow of these doubts. The temple became his new world, its lessons sharp and unyielding. The Jedi way prized detachment. He was told to let go of what he loved, to let go of what he feared. But the boy had been shaped in a place where holding on was survival. To release was to die. He excelled quickly in the disciplines that required skill, focus, and daring. Lightsaber drills, starfighter maneuvers, the weaving of the Force into motion, these came to him as if remembered from a life before this one. But where others found serenity, he found restlessness. Where others listened for the Force's whisper, he felt its roar. And far beyond the temple's reach, another listener leaned toward that roar. Darth Sidious, hidden beneath the mask of Chancellor Palpatine, felt the boy's presence across the currents of the Force. He did not rush. Patience was the way of predators. The boy was not ready to serve him yet, but he would be. The hunger in him would grow. Hunger was the leash that required no chains. The Council could not see the predator's gaze. They spoke of Anakin's potential with guarded tones, weighing every achievement against the danger. They sensed. The boy felt this wariness. It pressed on him, the way the suns of Tatooine had pressed on his skin. He wanted to prove them wrong. He wanted to be seen as more than a gamble. But wanting is the seed of needing, and needing is the seed of fear. The Force does not forgive fear. It bends around it, it sharpens against it, until fear becomes the blade in one's own hand. So the temple, which should have been a sanctuary, became another place where he felt the need to fight for space. He would rise in their ranks. He would show them they were wrong. And in the shadowed places between these vows, a whisper promised that one day all the power he sought could be his, without their permission. The Council's stillness remained, but beneath it the first cracks had formed. What they had taken into shape, they had also taken in to test. And the Force, ever watchful, cares nothing for the difference. This was the quiet beginning of a much louder fall, for the First Fractures War began not with the roar of fleets, but with the slow tightening of threads. The Republic had been rotting for years, its roots hollowed by greed and politics. When the Clone Wars came, they arrived as both a crisis and a cure. The Jedi became generals, not monks. The temple's halls emptied as the Order spread across the stars. Anakin Skywalker, now older, stepped into the war like a blade unsheathed. In the chaos of battle, he found a rhythm that training halls could not give him. The cockpit became his second skin. The lightsaber became his pulse. Victories followed him, and with them, stories. On 100 worlds his name was spoken with awe. Yet the Council still looked at him as if they were guarding a storm, not nurturing a hero. The war fed his pride. It also fed his resentment. Obi-Wan guided him well enough in combat, but between them stretched an unspoken distance, the space between teacher and student, brother and rival. In that space, doubts began to grow. Anakin wondered why the Council withheld their full trust. The Council wondered if their caution was not already too late. Dreams began to visit him, dreams too vivid to be chance. He saw people he loved in danger. He saw Padmé, his secret wife, gasping for air, her life fading. When he woke, the fear clung to him like frost. The Jedi taught that the future was fluid, that visions were not chains. But he could not accept this. If the future could be seen, it could be changed. If it could be changed, he would change it. The cracks widened. Each battle won for the Republic was also a battle won for Chancellor Palpatine, who sat at the war's center like a spider in its web. To Anakin, Palpatine was not a politician. He was a friend, a mentor who spoke to him as an equal, who praised him without restraint, who saw no danger in his power. It was a voice he had longed to hear from the Jedi and had never received. In the Force, small shifts began to gather like distant thunder. The light dimmed in places where it had once burned. The dark stretched quietly under the cover of loyalty. A necessity. To Anakin, the war was proof of his strength. To the Sith, it was proof of his path. Still, he did not yet see the whole trap. Both sides of the war, Republic and Separatists, were carved from the same design, built by the same hidden hand. The enemy was an illusion. Victory itself was a leash, but the boy from Tatooine had not learned to question the ground he walked upon. He only saw what lay ahead. Another mission, another battle, another chance to prove himself. The Council began to sense his closeness to the Chancellor. They spoke of it in cautious tones, aware of the power Palpatine held. Anakin heard whispers of their mistrust. Each one struck like a grain of sand under the skin, small but sharp enough to wound. He told himself it was because they feared his greatness. In truth, they feared losing him. The fractures deepened when the Council refused to grant him the title of Master despite giving him a seat on their body. It was an insult wrapped in duty. His pride burned. His loyalty wavered. His hunger grew. These were not the feelings of a Jedi, but he no longer cared to measure himself by their code. Palpatine's voice was ready. He spoke of powers forbidden. To the Jedi, powers to stop death itself. Powers that could save Padmé. He named them not as fantasies, but as secrets he could teach. And in that moment, Anakin began to lean away from the light. Every step of the war carried him further. Every death on the battlefield fed the part of him that would one day kill without hesitation. The fractures were not loud yet. They were hairline cracks in a statue that still seemed whole. But I, who speak from the crystal's memory, know how stone shatters. It begins in silence. It ends in ruin. And already the first dust was falling from the surface. Chapter 5. The temptation of shadows. The Chancellor's office was bathed in the soft golden light of Coruscant's setting sun. From its towering windows, the city stretched endlessly. Rivers of speeders winding between gleaming spires, a symphony of motion and light. It should have felt alive, hopeful. Instead, to Anakin Skywalker, the view felt like a cage. He stood at the far end of the room, hands clasped behind his back, restless. War had aged him. The boy who once dreamed of adventure now bore the weight of 1,000 decisions, each etched into the furrow of his brow. Every battle fought for the Republic seemed only to feed the war machine. Every victory came at the cost of something he could never get back. At the desk, Chancellor Palpatine regarded him with the same patient smile he always wore, a smile that seemed to see past the armor, past the titles, into the raw heart beneath. "You've done well, Anakin," he said, voice smooth as silk. "Better than well. The Jedi may not say it, but I will. The Republic owes you everything." Anakin's eyes flicked away. Praise from the Jedi Council was rare. Praise from the Chancellor was intoxicating. Palpatine rose and moved closer, his steps unhurried. "There are truths the Jedi do not tell you, not because they do not exist, but because they fear them. Fear is the enemy of wisdom. Wouldn't you agree?" Jaw tightened. He thought of the Council's secrecy, their mistrust, their constant reminders of patience and restraint. "They think I'm dangerous," he admitted. "They fear your potential," Palpatine corrected gently. "They would see you bound by rules older than the Republic itself, forged in times long past." "But he stopped beside Anakin, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I see no limits for you." A pause hung between them, heavy and deliberate. Palpatine moved to a hidden panel in the wall, pressing his palm against it. With a soft hiss, a compartment opened, revealing a small, ancient holocron, its facets glowing faintly red. The light painted the Chancellor's face in shadows. "This," he said, almost reverently, "is knowledge from before the Jedi existed, before the Republic, a path they forbid, not because it is evil, but because it is powerful." The holocron's light pulsed as though alive. Anakin felt the force around it, not in the calm, meditative way of the Jedi, but as a storm barely contained. It whispered to him, though the words were just beyond understanding. "What kind of knowledge?" he asked, unable to tear his gaze away. Palpatine's smile deepened, as though the question was inevitable. "The kind that could stop death." The words landed like a spark in dry grass. Anakin's mind flashed to Pab, her smile, her laughter, the life growing within her, but also the dreams, the visions, her dying in his arms. Every night they grew more vivid, more certain. "Stop. Death," he echoed, "not the crude trick of prolonging life in decrepitude." Palpatine continued, turning the holocron in his hands. "True mastery of the Force, the power to protect those you love from the final breath. It is a gift only a few have possessed, and the Jedi would rather it be lost than admit their failure to learn it." Anakin's pulse quickened. He remembered Shmi, his mother, her last moments, her broken body in his arms, the helplessness, the rage, and now, damn, he could not lose her too. He would not. But the Jedi had taught him otherwise. Death was part of the natural order. To cling to life was to invite suffering. Yet what did they know of love? What did they know of the agony of loss? Palpatine's voice softened, almost fatherly. "You have the strength to learn, Anakin, but you must be willing to see beyond the chains the Jedi place on you." Chains. Anakin frowned, double quotes. "Yes, their dogma, their half-truths. They will tell you that power is dangerous, that emotion clouds judgment. But what is love, if not the purest reason to act? Why should you deny yourself the means to protect the ones you cherish most?" The holocron glowed brighter in Palpatine's hand. Anakin could almost feel its warmth. Somewhere deep inside, a seed began to stir, a seed of desire fed by fear, and then, unbidden, the image came Padme, gasping for breath, her skin pale, her eyes pleading with him to save her. His hands empty, useless. the sound of a heartbeat fading into nothing. Anakin swallowed hard. The Jedi would never allow this. They don't have to know, Palpatine replied smoothly. In time, when you've mastered it, you could save her. You could save anyone. The thought was a knife in his chest, sharp, dangerous, but impossible to ignore. Palpatine closed the compartment, the holocron vanishing into shadow. I will not press you. You must decide for yourself. But remember, the future is not set. It is shaped by those who seize it. The Chancellor walked back to his desk, leaving Anakin standing alone. Yet he was not alone. The holocron's whisper seemed to follow him, curling around his thoughts like smoke. Outside the vast windows, the sun finally dipped beneath the horizon, and Coruscant's night came alive with artificial stars. In that darkness, Anakin Skywalker felt the first true pull towards something the Jedi had always warned him about. But now, it didn't feel like danger. It felt like hope, and somewhere far ahead, in a time yet to come, the holocron's voice, whether real or imagined, trembled. This is when destiny began to rot. Chapter 6. The fall of the temple. The night was quiet when the betrayal began. Coruscant's endless towers shimmered under the silver light of the moon. The hum of speeders far below masking the march of boots that would change the galaxy forever. The Jedi Temple stood like a fortress of serenity, its spires reaching toward the heavens, its halls glowing with warm light. To those inside, it was home. To Anakin Skywalker, approaching with the 501st Legion at his back, it was the first battlefield of his new life. His face was unreadable beneath the hood. The blue glow of his lightsaber hilt at his side was the only hint of what was to come. Beside him, clone troopers in white and blue armor moved in perfect formation. Their loyalty was absolute. They followed orders without question, orders given in the name of the Republic, but born from a much darker command. The gates of the temple opened at his approach. Inside, younglings trained in the art of the Jedi, their laughter echoing softly in the vast chambers. Masters and knights moved through the halls, unaware that their time was measured in heartbeats. Anakin's boots struck the polished floor with measured precision. The air inside was warm, scented faintly with incense from the meditation rooms. He could almost pretend nothing was about to happen. A small voice called his name. Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do? A boy no older than 10 stood in the doorway of the council chamber, clutching a training saber. His eyes were wide with fear, yet filled with trust. Anakin looked down at him, the conflict in his heart buried so deep it no longer reached his face. For a single second, the boy from Tatooine seemed to surface, then vanished. The hiss and snap of a lightsaber igniting filled the room. Outside, the attack began in earnest. Blaster fire echoed through the halls. The once holy corridors became killing fields. Clone troopers advanced with military precision, their shots cutting down Jedi in mid-stride. Masters who had fought through 100 battles fell without warning, struck from behind by those they had commanded only hours before. The temple's tranquil fountains ran red as the battle raged through its gardens. Anakin moved through the chaos like a blade through silk. He was not the reckless warrior of the Clone Wars. He was something colder, more deliberate. Every swing of his lightsaber was fatal. He cut down knights, Padawans, even the wounded, his strikes precise, unhesitating. The screams, the smell of scorched flesh, the sound of bodies falling, none of it slowed him. High above the city, Jedi starfighters tried to return to the temple, only to be blasted from the sky by the Republic's own gunships. The great archives, centuries of knowledge, holocrons and history, were set ablaze. Flames licked the shelves, smoke curling up to the vaulted ceilings. Statues of ancient Jedi cracked and fell, their faces breaking apart as if the past itself was shattering. In the heart of the temple, the last resistance formed. A group of masters, their robes singed, gathered near the great staircase. There, sabers blazed blue and green against the red of incoming blaster bolts. For a moment, it seemed they might hold the line. Then Anakin stepped into view. The fight that followed was brief. He moved with terrifying speed, his strikes fueled by a power none of them understood until it was too late. When the last master fell, the staircase was silent except for the hum of his blade. Beyond the temple, the Republic shifted in those same hours. Senators voted emergency powers to the Chancellor, unaware or unwilling to admit what it truly meant. The Holonews called it the end of the war. In truth, it was the birth of an empire. Far away, on Mustafar, a volcanic world of black rock and rivers of molten fire, separatist leaders gathered in secret, awaiting orders they believed would end the conflict. Those orders would soon come, carried by the man who had once been the Jedi's chosen hope. The final act of the temple's fall came with the sealing of its gates. Smoke poured from its windows. The bodies of the fallen masters, knights, Padawans, and younglings lay where they had fallen. The Force itself seemed to mourn, a deep tremor echoing across the galaxy. Only one man returned to walk among the ashes. Obi-Wan Kenobi, called back to Coruscant by the horror of what he felt through the Force, stepped through the charred remains of the Great Hall. He saw the scorched walls, the shattered statues, the still smouldering library, and then he saw the bodies, so many, so small. His breath caught in his throat. His heart broke. And when he learned who had done this, the betrayal cut deeper than any blade. The confrontation came on Mustafar. Rivers of fire raged below as Obi-Wan and Anakin faced each other on a blackened platform. The heat shimmered between them, but it was nothing compared to the fury in their eyes. "You were my brother, Anakin," Obi-Wan said, voice raw with grief. "I loved you. I have brought peace, freedom, justice, and security to my new empire." Anakin replied, his words dripping with conviction and venom. The man Obi-Wan knew was gone. Their duel was fierce, a storm of speed and precision. The platform buckled beneath them, sparks and molten rock flying in every direction. Each strike was a clash of history and betrayal, of love turned to rage. When it ended, Anakin lay broken on the black sand, the fire reflecting in his eyes as his body began to burn. Obi-Wan turned away, his heart heavy with the knowledge that the boy he had trained was gone. What rose from the flames was no longer Anakin Skywalker. The man who had once been the Republic's greatest hope was dead. In his place stood a shadow wrapped in armor, breathing not with the rhythm of life, but with the mechanical rasp of survival. The galaxy had lost its protector and gained its most feared tyrant. Chapter 7. The Iron Breath. The medbay aboard the Emperor's personal vessel was cold, sterile, and reeking faintly of burned flesh. Machines hummed in rhythmic tones, each connected to what remained of Anakin Skywalker. His body was unrecognizable, skin charred black, limbs severed, lungs scorched beyond healing. Only his eyes moved, darting beneath heavy lids, trapped somewhere between agony and darkness. He could not speak. He could barely think. But he could feel the pain, sharp and unending, a constant reminder of Mustafa's fire, Palpatine stood at his side, cloaked in black, watching with a satisfaction he did not bother to hide. "You will live," he said, "not as comfort, but as command. Your injuries are severe, but the Force is strong in you, stronger than ever, and I will give you the means to use it." Droids swarmed over the surgical table, their tools hissing and sparking. Cybernetic limbs were grafted to raw muscle and bone. Metal plates replaced shattered ribs. Tubes and wires fed into what remained of his chest, forcing breath where his lungs could no longer draw it. The mask was the last piece, a black helm descending slowly, sealing him in darkness. When it locked into place, the first sound filled the room, a deep, mechanical rasp. Inhale, exhale. It was the sound of a man rebuilt into something less than human, yet more than mortal. When the restraints were released, he rose with unnatural strength. The armor was heavy, but the rage inside him made it light. He staggered once, then stood tall. The medbay's white lights reflected in the glossy surface of his helmet. "Lord Vader," Palpatine said, voice thick with triumph. "Can you hear me?" The answer was not in words, but in the slow, steady breath, the iron rhythm that would haunt the galaxy. From that moment, Vader's existence became a march through shadow. Every breath was a reminder of loss, each step a retreat from the man he had been. The armor was his prison, but also his weapon. Pain became the fuel for his power. The Jedi were scattered, broken from the purge, but the Emperor demanded more. "Hunt them," he ordered. "All of them. Leave none to carry the name." Whole star systems fell beneath Vader's hand. Fleets surrendered at the sight of his flagship's arrival. Governors pledged loyalty out of fear rather than belief. Wherever whispers of surviving Jedi arose, Vader followed. He did not question, he did not hesitate. His blade burned red, a permanent declaration of allegiance to the dark. The hunts were merciless. On the outer rim world of Denarin, he walked alone into a marketplace. His black armor cutting through the crowd's murmur like a wound. The Jedi hiding there emerged at the sound of his saber, 3 against 1. They fought with the desperation of the cornered, but desperation was nothing against precision. Within minutes, the square was silent save for the hiss of cooling plasma. Vader left without a word, the bodies cooling in his wake. On Ando Prime, in the frozen remains of a Jedi outpost, he found a knight meditating in the snow, waiting for him. She did not ignite her blade, only bowed her head. "Anakin," she said softly, the name tasting like memory. He killed her with a single strike and felt nothing. The snow covered her body within moments. Yet in the darkest hours, when the battles were done and the silence returned, there were moments when something else pressed at the edges of his mind. He would stand alone in the observation deck of his Star Destroyer, stars stretching out like cold fire. Somewhere deep within, buried under the weight of machinery and hate, a voice still called his name. Not Vader, not Lord Anakin. He never answered. The Emperor fed him new enemies, new missions, keeping him in motion. But no matter how many Jedi he cut down, no matter how many worlds bent the knee, the ache within never faded. Power had not shielded him from loss. It had only buried it under armor and breath. He told himself it was enough. He told himself the boy from Tatooine had died on Mustafar, but the ghost remained, silent and suffocating. The galaxy came to fear the sound of his arrival, the heavy steps, the hiss of hydraulics, the iron breath that preceded death. To some, it was the sound of the Empire's will. To others, it was the sound of doom. But to Vader, It was the sound of chains. Each inhale and exhale a reminder that he would never be free. And so he marched on, deeper into servitude, deeper into darkness. Somewhere in the unreachable corners of his mind, the ghost of Anakin Skywalker screamed without sound, unheard by all except perhaps by the man who had built the prison. Chapter 8. The Age of the Inquisitors, the Jedi Purge, had burned through the galaxy like a plague, but the Emperor knew embers remained. Jedi were like weeds. Cut them down, and they returned in the cracks of forgotten worlds. Vader could not be everywhere at once. That was the purpose of the Inquisitorius. They came from many places, fallen Jedi who had bent the knee to survive, Force sensitives plucked from obscurity, killers and hunters molded into a single purpose. Their training was brutal. Mercy was forbidden. The Emperor called them Inquisitors, but among the hunted they were known only as shadows with red. Blades. Vader was their master, their fear, and their executioner. The Inquisitors served the Emperor's will, but they answered to Vader. His first act, as their overseer, was to make them understand what failure meant. On the training deck aboard Fortress Inquisitorius, he ordered 2 of them to duel, not to test skill, but to watch one die. When the survivor hesitated over the killing blow, Vader struck him down himself. "Hesitation is treason," he said, his voice a cold machine's growl. The survivors bowed lower after that. The Inquisitors spread through the galaxy in small packs, following rumors, intercepting transmissions, tracking faint traces of the Force. They were efficient in their cruelty. Villages that harbored Jedi were razed to ash. Families were broken apart. Children who showed ability were taken. Those who resisted were silenced. All of it served 2 purposes: to find the survivors of Order 66, and to make the galaxy forget that the Jedi had ever been protectors. Vader often hunted alongside them, but his presence was not aid, it was judgment. On the mining moon of Calith, an Inquisitor cornered a Jedi Knight in the upper spires of a drilling rig. The duel was fierce, the clang of metal walkways echoing under the crash of sabers. But when the Jedi disarmed the Inquisitor, Vader stepped forward, the red blade ignited, and within moments, the Jedi lay broken. Vader did not help the wounded Inquisitor to his feet. "The Emperor has no need of the weak," he said, and left him there. The fortress itself was a monument to fear, an obsidian spike rising from the black waters of Nur. It was isolated, surrounded by endless ocean, its halls echoing with the hiss of training sabers and the screams of prisoners. Interrogation was an art here. Some Jedi broke under pain, others under lies. Vader preferred silence. When he entered an interrogation chamber, it was not to speak, it was to finish what had been started. Despite the Emperor's assurances, Vader never fully trusted the Inquisitors. They were tools, but tools could betray. Many had once been Jedi. Their loyalty was always in question. He kept them divided, turning suspicion into a weapon. Rivalries festered, informants whispered. Every Inquisitor knew that the greatest danger to them was not the Jedi they hunted, it was their master. The hunts were relentless. On the trade world of Morlin, an old Jedi master had hidden among spice traders. His robes traded for stained merchant's cloth. When the Inquisitors found him, they surrounded the marketplace, trapping him among stalls of exotic goods. He fought with a speed that belied his age, disarming 2 before Vader stepped in. Their sabers clashed once, twice, and then the old man fell, his chest smoking from the strike. Vader ordered the marketplace burned. Some Jedi surrendered when they saw him. Others chose death over capture. But no matter how many fell, rumors persisted, whispers of a hidden enclave. A master gathering survivors, a spark that would one day ignite rebellion. The Emperor dismissed them as lies. Vader did not. He knew the Jedi too well. Sparks had a way of finding air. Over time, the Inquisitors became less about hunting Jedi and more about maintaining fear. They rooted out dissidents, crushed uprisings before they began, and silenced anyone who dared speak the word Jedi aloud. The galaxy grew quieter, not in peace, but in submission. And in that silence, the Empire thrived, yet even in victory, there was unease. Vader's iron breath echoed through the fortress halls, a constant reminder to the Inquisitors that their power existed only because he allowed it. They trained harder, hunted faster, killed without question, not for the Emperor, but to keep from drawing Vader's wrath. Still, the ghost of Anakin Skywalker lingered in him, surfacing at strange moments. A captured Padawan once looked up at him and asked, trembling, "Why are you doing this?" He did not answer. He turned away and left her to the Inquisitors. But the question followed him back to his Star Destroyer, echoing in the silence between. Each mechanical breath, the Emperor saw none of this doubt. To him, the Inquisitorius was proof of Vader's loyalty. To the galaxy, they were proof that resistance was suicide. But to Vader, they were something else entirely, a wall between him and the remnants of a life he had destroyed, a wall he had built, stone by stone, until there was nothing left on the other side but shadow. And so the age of the Inquisitors stretched on, year after year, until even the memory of the Jedi Order began to fade. But embers do not vanish. They wait, smouldering in the dark, until the wind changes. Chapter 9. The boy from the Dunestatuan was a world of sand and silence, a place where dreams withered beneath the twin suns. Yet it was here, in the heat-shimmering horizon, that hope was born once more. The wind carried the scent of dry dust and ancient bones, the same wind that had once swept over the boy who became Anakin Skywalker. Now it whispered past another boy, Luke, who stared at the burning sky as if the answer to his restless heart might be written in the light. Luke Skywalker did not know whose eyes he bore, nor the blood that quickened in his veins. He only knew that something out there, beyond the moisture farms, beyond the endless dunes, was calling to him. It was a yearning that neither Uncle Owen's stern caution nor Aunt Beru's gentle smiles could quiet. He would often wander to the ridges at sunset, watching the twin orbs sink together into the horizon as though they were brothers fated to set at the same time. In those moments, he felt both terribly small and impossibly vast. It was as if the stars themselves leaned closer to listen when he spoke his private thoughts into the desert wind. Far from Luke's sight, another figure moved in the wastelands, an old man, his cloak frayed, his steps careful yet purposeful. Obi-Wan Kenobi had learned to walk as a shadow. The years in exile had hollowed him, carving grief deep into his bones. He had fought wars, commanded armies, watched the Jedi Order burn. He had seen Anakin, the boy he loved like a brother, consumed by darkness. And now his last task was not to fight, but to watch. From the ridge of a rocky outcrop, Obi-Wan would watch the boy at the Lars homestead. He told himself it was enough, that keeping Luke hidden and safe was victory enough. But in truth, it was a penance. Protecting the boy was the one thing left he could still do for Anakin, or for the memory of him. The galaxy beyond Tatooine groaned under the iron fist of the Empire. Cities bent to imperial law. Outer Rim worlds were squeezed dry of resources, their people crushed under taxes and fear. But Tatooine was a forgotten corner, unimportant except to smugglers, slavers, and the occasional bounty hunter. The Empire's shadow fell here less often, and that made it a sanctuary of sorts. It was in this stillness that the Force began to stir again, not loudly, not with the storms of the Clone Wars, but in a quiet pulse, like a heartbeat. In the dark, it moved through the boy, faint but steady, shaping his instincts, sharpening his senses. Luke could feel it when he piloted his T-16, when he shot womp rats with uncanny precision, when danger seemed to brush his mind a second before it happened. He didn't know the word for it. Not yet, OBI-1 knew. He could feel the ripple every time Luke's presence touched the Force. It was both a comfort and a warning. The stronger the boy grew, the more likely it was that others, dangerous others, would feel it too. There were days Obi-Wan would almost approach him. He would watch Luke repairing a vaporator with tools that seemed far too big for his hands. His brow furrowed in stubborn concentration, and he would see Anakin again, the same spark, the same fire, and then the old fear would return. Fire could warm, or it could burn everything. One night, in the solitude of his hut, Obi-Wan lit a small lamp and unrolled a faded map of the galaxy. His fingers traced old hyperspace lanes, battlefronts, worlds, where he had once been welcomed as a Jedi General. Now, most of those places would hand him over to the Empire without a second thought. He stopped at Coruscant, the city planet, once the shining jewel of the Republic, and remembered the Emperor's balcony, the roar of thunder, the smoke rising from the Jedi Temple. He thought of Anakin's face, twisted in fury, yellow eyes burning, and then, years later, of Luke's face, unlined and open, eyes as blue as Tatooine's sky. It was a cruel symmetry. The wind outside shifted, rattling the flimsy shutters. Obi-Wan closed the map. He told himself again what he had told himself every night for 19 years. Wait, watch. The time will come for Luke. Life continued as a cycle of chores, races, and daydreams. But in the space between those cycles, the yearning grew sharper. He would look at the sky and feel a pull so strong it made his chest ache. He imagined himself flying through those distant stars, doing something that mattered. And though he couldn't name it, a quiet truth lingered in his heart. He was meant for something more. The first hints of change came as whispers, rumors of rebellion. Smugglers at the cantina spoke of skirmishes against Imperial convoys. Moisture traders mentioned strange sightings in the desert, ships with markings no one recognized. To most, they were just stories. To Luke, they were sparks, and somewhere deep in the Force, those sparks were noticed. In a black fortress aboard a star destroyer, a figure in obsidian armor stood motionless, gazing into the void of space. Rasp of mechanical breathing filled the chamber. Vader could not yet name what he sensed, only that it was familiar, elusive, and impossibly distant, like a shadow of a shadow reaching for him across the stars. Tatooine remained quiet, but the galaxy was shifting. The currents of fate, unseen by most, began to gather speed. And though Luke did not yet know it, every grain of sand beneath his feet, every breath of wind across the dunes, was carrying him toward the edge of the life he thought he knew. Hope had ended here once, in fire and betrayal. Now, quietly, it began again. Chapter 10, Whispers Across the Stars. The war had not yet turned, but it had begun to hum with possibility. The rebellion, a scatter of ragtag fleets, secret cells. and stubborn dreamers moved like shadows across the galaxy. Each victory was a spark. Each loss was a lesson carved in blood. And somewhere within this tide of skirmishes and whispers, a farm boy from Tatooine found himself drawn into something far older and larger than war. Luke Skywalker had joined the Alliance almost by accident, though he would have called it destiny. His days of moisture farming were gone, replaced by the rhythm of briefings, starship maintenance, and sudden, violent sorties. But beneath the pilot's helmet and the uniform, he carried something he did not yet understand. A restlessness that felt less like ambition and more like a summons. He flew missions with Wedge Antilles and the other survivors of Yavin. But at night, in the silence of his bunk, Luke felt, watched, not with malice, but with intent, as though something far away and yet unbearably close was studying him, weighing him. Across the vast distances of space, Darth Vader felt it too. It came to him not in the blaring clarity of battle, but in the quiet moments between, when he sat in his meditation chamber, mask removed, listening to the mechanical hiss of his respirator against the thrum of his own heartbeat. It was a presence, fragile yet persistent, flickering like a candle in the Force. Vader could not name it at first, but the sensation was maddeningly familiar. The Emperor, seated upon his throne of shadows, felt the same current and smiled the way only a predator could. He told Vader nothing directly. Instead, he encouraged his apprentice's search for the source of this disturbance, feeding him just enough to keep his mind turning. Palpatine was patient. All pieces were moving toward the place he desired. Luke's dreams began to change. Once, they had been full of mundane fragments from his past. The wind over the dune sea, the crackle of his uncle's voice, the burning wreckage of the homestead. Now, the dreams were colder, stranger. He saw steel corridors and bottomless chasms. He heard a breathing so deep it seemed to fill the universe. Sometimes he caught the outline of a tall, black figure, neither approaching nor receding, just watching him. Leia Organa noticed his distraction. In strategy meetings, his attention sometimes wandered, his eyes half focused on some invisible horizon. She tried to speak with him, but Luke could offer no explanation that wouldn't sound like madness. In space, the war went on. The rebellion struck Imperial convoys, liberated prisoners, and dodged the relentless might of star destroyers. And each time Luke found himself in the cockpit, the Force seemed to wrap around him like an unseen co-pilot, pulling him toward survival, guiding his hand in ways he could not explain to the others. Somewhere in the labyrinth of Imperial command, a new order came from the Emperor himself. Locate the pilot who destroyed the Death Star. It was a simple command on the surface, but it carried a weight Vader did not speak aloud. This boy, this unknown, had been the one to deliver the greatest single blow the Empire had suffered. And yet, the Force sang in him. Vader began to hunt, but not with the Empire's usual brutality. This was not a purge. It was a search. Reports of the boy trickled in. A daring X-Wing pilot here. A figure seen alongside Princess Organa there. Each rumor brought Vader closer, each battle pulling the invisible thread tighter. And then, in the cold emptiness between systems, it happened. The connection, once faint, flared in the Force. Vader felt him, not a name, not a face, just him. A presence like a mirror, reflecting not the darkness, but something unbearably bright. And in that same instant, far from the Sith Lord's ship, Luke felt a shadow fall across his mind. The sensation was not hostile, but it was overwhelming, like standing too close to a fire, whose heat could both warm and consume. They knew each other before they knew why. The Emperor's smile widened. He had not told Vader the full truth, that this boy was more than just a rebel pilot. He was the key to bending the future to his will. The time would come when both apprentice and prey would be drawn into his grasp, willingly or otherwise. For now, he let the game play on, and so, across the galaxy, father and son moved toward each other like comets on intersecting paths, each feeling the other's gravity, each uncertain of what would happen when they finally collided. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, for in the vast tapestry of the Force, threads were tightening, and destiny was quietly arranging its pieces for the next move. Chapter 11. Duel of Bloodlines. The air inside Cloud City's carbon freeze chamber was thick with heat and steam, lit in bursts of orange and shadow by the machinery that surrounded it. Pipes hissed. The floor vibrated faintly under the weight of the massive systems at work. Somewhere far below, the city floated in the endless sky of Bespin. But up here, it felt as though the world had narrowed to a single room and two figures within it. Luke Skywalker stepped cautiously onto the grated walkway, lightsaber ignited, in a clean bar of green-white fire. His breath came fast, not from exertion, but from the undeniable presence that filled the space. The man waiting for him was taller, heavier, clad in armor as black as a starless night. Darth Vader did not raise his weapon immediately. So, the deep, mechanical voice rumbled, "You are the one they call Skywalker." Luke kept his stance firm, remembering every word Ben Kenobi had told him about focus, about the Force. Yet there was something in Vader's tone, a strange weight, as though he were not speaking to an enemy, but to someone he had sought for. "A long time. I'm here to stop you," Luke said, his voice steady but low. The Sith Lord tilted his head. "You have no idea what you are facing." And then, without warning, the red blades snapped into life. Their sabers met with a crack that lit the chamber in flashing colors. Luke moved quickly, his training with Yoda sharpening his reflexes, but Vader's strength was relentless. Each strike from the Sith Lord was like the fall of a hammer, forcing Luke backward along the walkway. Sparks flew from the railings as the blades collided. "You've grown strong," Vader said, pressing the attack. "But strength without understanding is nothing." Luke gritted his teeth and pushed forward, forcing Vader back a step. "Understand enough to know you're evil." Vader's reply was a low, almost amused growl. "Evil is a matter of perspective." The duel became a storm, Luke darting in with quick, agile cuts, Vader countering with slow, deliberate swings that carried crushing weight. The clang of metal echoed in the chamber, mixed with the hiss of steam and the hum of the energy field. Below, Luke managed a feint that caught Vader slightly off guard, grazing his armor. The Sith Lord's reaction was immediate. His saber slammed down with such force that Luke barely brought his blade up in time to block, the shock rattling through his arms. "You are untrained," Vader said, driving him toward the carbon freeze. "Pit, your anger makes you predictable." "I'm not angry," Luke shot back. Vader's helmet inclined slightly, as if studying him. "Oh, but you will be." With a sweep of his free hand, Vader unleashed a force push that hurled Luke backward. He hit the wall hard, gasping, his saber skidding across the floor. Vader did not pursue, not yet. Instead, he stood still, letting the silence stretch. letting Luke hear the mechanical rhythm of his breathing. Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father, Vader said, voice lowering into something almost conversational. Luke scrambled to his feet, gripping his saber again. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. The pause that followed felt like the chamber itself was holding still. Vader stepped closer, his presence towering. No, he said at last, each word a hammer blow. I am your father. Luke's mind reeled. The words seemed impossible, absurd, and yet, deep in the Force, he felt no lie. It was a truth so terrible it cut deeper than any blade. No. Luke's voice broke. That's not true. That's impossible. Search your feelings, Vader said. You know it to be true. Luke's grip faltered. The duel, the war, even the rebellion, all of it seemed to fade beneath the weight of that revelation. Vader extended his hand, not to strike, but to offer. Join me. Together we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. Father and son, side by side. For a heartbeat, Luke saw it. A galaxy without war, without chaos. But the cost. The cost was everything he believed in. I'll never join you. The choice was made. Vader advanced again, more aggressively now. Luke leaped back onto the narrow gantry, the battle resuming in a flurry of light and shadow. Vader drove him toward the edge, each blow forcing him closer to the sheer drop. A final strike knocked Luke's saber from his grasp. In desperation, he turned to leap away, but Vader's blade cut low, severing his right hand. Pain exploded through him. His scream echoed across the chamber as his weapon tumbled into the abyss. Luke, Vader said, his voice no longer taunting, but commanding. You do not yet realize your importance. You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and we can rule the galaxy as father and son. Luke, clutching the searing wound, looked down into the endless void below. He could feel the Force around him, and he made his choice. Better the fall than the darkness. He stepped back and let go. The wind tore at him as he plunged, the chamber disappearing above, Vader's figure shrinking into shadow. The fight was over, but the war between them had only just begun. Chapter 12. The Emperor's Hand. The Emperor's throne room was a cathedral of shadows, its vast expanse lit only by the cold glow of Coruscant's cityscape beyond the towering windows. Dark marble floors reflected the faint shimmer of the night, and every sound seemed to vanish into the oppressive silence. Here, at the heart of the Empire, power did not shout, it whispered. Emperor Palpatine sat upon his throne as though carved from the darkness itself. His hood masked most of his features, but his yellow eyes gleamed like twin predators in the dim light. Each movement of his skeletal hands was deliberate, each word soaked in calculation. Around him, the very air seemed thick, heavy with the Force twisted to his will. Darth Vader entered, the hiss of his respirator the only sound daring to disturb the Emperor's chamber. He knelt, a giant humbled, but the slight hesitation in his posture did not go unnoticed. You seek to hide your thoughts from me, Lord Vader, the Emperor murmured. There is no such thing, Vader replied, though the weight of Bespin still lingered on him. Palpatine's smile was thin and knowing. He had felt the shift, a thread of light struggling against Vader's darkness. Luke Skywalker's existence was no longer a mere curiosity. He had become a fracture line in the Sith's dominion. The boy, the Emperor continued, voice low and silken. He is strong, stronger than you were at his age. He could be turned. Vader's head inclined, as if in agreement, but his silence was a fortress. Palpatine studied him for a long moment, then rose with the slow precision of a spider closing in on its prey. Bring him to me. With the proper guidance, he will become a powerful ally. If he will not join us, then he will be destroyed. The words were not a suggestion, they were an imperial decree. But beneath the command lay a threat. Unspoken yet undeniable, Vader was replaceable as Vader departed. The Emperor turned toward the city beyond, hands clasped behind his back. His gaze cut through the skyline, piercing layers of durasteel and atmosphere, as if he could already see the moment Luke would kneel before him, not as a Jedi, but as a weapon. Palpatine's mind moved in cold, measured steps. The galaxy was a game board, and every piece had its place. The rebellion was a nuisance, the Senate a relic, but Luke Skywalker. Luke was the keystone. To control him was to control the future, and in the dark, the Emperor's smile widened. The trap was already being set. Chapter 13, Redemption in The fire, the throne room, was prophecy's final stage, vast, dark, and echoing with the hum of power. Lightning from the Emperor's hands danced across the air, slashing jagged blue scars into the shadows. The stench of ozone and burning flesh filled the chamber. Luke Skywalker writhed on the floor, his body arched under the assault, every muscle locked in agony. His screams tore through the space between heartbeats, but the Emperor did not relent. To him, the pain was not cruelty, it was inevitability. Darth Vader stood at the edge of the scene, his towering form rigid. Inside the armor, conflict raged. The mechanical rasp of his respirator was steady, but beneath it, something older stirred. A heartbeat, he thought, long dead. The Emperor's voice was triumphant, dripping venom with every word. Now, young Skywalker, you will die. Luke's plea was raw, desperate. Father, please. The word struck Vader like a blade. Not a title of respect, not a manipulation, a call, a tether to a life buried beneath decades of darkness. His vision swam, not with rage, but with memory. A boy on Tatooine, a mother's smile, a wife's laughter, the face of a newborn child. The choice did not come as a thought. It came as an ancient instinct. Older than the Sith, older than the Jedi, protect the child. In a single, explosive motion, Vader moved. The hiss of servos screamed against the strain as he seized the Emperor from behind. Lightning arced wildly, striking the walls, searing deep into Vader's armor. Circuits fried, flesh burned. Palpatine's scream was both fury and disbelief. His skeletal hands clawed at Vader's helmet, each bolt of Force lightning cutting deeper into the man beneath the machine. But Vader did not stop. Step by step, he carried the Emperor toward the abyss. With one final heave, he hurled him into the reactor shaft. The lightning flared one last time, then vanished, swallowed by the endless void. The silence after was not peace, but exhaustion. Vader collapsed beside Luke. His armor smoked, sparking in small bursts. Every breath was a battle. "Help me, take this mask off," Vader whispered. "But you'll die," Luke protested, his voice breaking. "Nothing can stop that now." Luke's trembling hands worked the locks. With a hiss, the mask lifted. For the first and last time, Anakin Skywalker looked upon his son with his own eyes, pale, worn, but human. A faint smile touched his lips. "You were right. You were right about me." Luke's tears fell freely. "I won't leave you. You already have." "Luke," Anakin murmured, his voice fading. "You saved me." And in that moment, the shadow that had been Darth Vader dissolved. Anakin Skywalker returned, only to fade into the Force. Carried on the whisper of a final breath. Chapter 14, The Balance. Fulfilled, the Chosen One prophecy had always been spoken of in absolutes. Light to destroy darkness, darkness to balance the light. But prophecies are never kind, and they are never clear. When the Emperor fell, the galaxy did not cheer in unison. The Sith were gone, but so too were the Jedi as they had once been. The galaxy's balance came not as a golden dawn, but as a strange, fragile, quiet, a silence that could be mistaken for peace. On the forest moon of Endor, the celebration raged through the night. Drums pounded, fires roared, Ewoks danced with unshakable joy. Yet apart from the revelry, Luke Skywalker stood alone. Before him lay the remains of his father's armor, blackened, scarred, and empty. The figure who had once struck fear into entire systems was now only a hollow shell of durasteel and scorched plastoid. Luke's hands were steady as he set the pyre. Flames caught quickly, the crackle of burning metal mixing with the sweet scent of the forest. The firelight reflected in his eyes. But his mind was far away, with the man beneath the armor. With the fleeting moments they had shared as father and son, the flames consumed the armor, piece by piece. The helmet's gleaming eyes dulled. Its voice silenced forever. In the flickering light, Luke saw not Darth Vader, but Anakin Skywalker, the man who had been both destroyer and savior. The fire was not for the Sith Lord, nor for the Jedi Knight. It was for both. It was for the man and the monster, united in death. In the unseen realms of the Force, something shifted. The darkness that had coiled around the galaxy loosened its grip. The current of the Force settled into a strange, tenuous balance. Not victory, not defeat, simply equilibrium. Among the stars, the past folded in on itself, becoming legend. The war, the fall, the redemption, all would be told and retold, changing with each voice until the truth was something no one could entirely touch. But, for now, the fire burned, and the son stood watch over his father's final rest. Chapter 15. The ashes of memory, the Empire's fall, was not the end. Empires rarely die clean deaths. They fracture, they fester, they leave behind splinters that cut long after the body is gone. In the first days after Endor, the galaxy seemed to breathe again. Worlds lit beacons, old flags were raised, prisoners freed. But in the shadowed corridors of power, new hands reached for the throne. Former admirals carved out fiefdoms. Loyalist governors tightened their grip on frightened worlds. The stars were bright, but between them, darkness pooled for Luke. The victory was not without weight. Every celebration was haunted by a presence. Just beyond reach, the memory of heavy, mechanical breathing, the whisper of a life both redeemed and lost. In the quiet moments, it was as if Vader still lingered, watching. The pyre on Endor had burned to embers, but in the cold reaches of space, the echo endured. In the farthest corners of the galaxy, whispers of the Dark Lord still held power. Some claimed to hear his voice in their dreams. Others swore that relics of his armor still hummed with the energy of the man who had worn them, deep within the Force. Where time has no hold, the echo of Vader's breath persisted. It was faint, almost imperceptible, a memory caught between heartbeats. But it was there, old evils stirred in that silence. Not all Sith teachings had been destroyed, not all ambitions buried. In forgotten tombs and abandoned worlds, the seeds of darkness waited, patient as stone. The prophecy had been fulfilled. But prophecy is never perfect. It is not an ending. It is only the closing of one chapter before the next begins. Chapter 16 echoes in the Force. The galaxy is never still. Even in peace, the Force murmurs, carrying fragments of the past into the present. In the years after Ender, those murmurs began to take shape, whispers in cantinas, unmarked transmissions on forgotten channels. Rumors passed in coded speech among old spies and scholars. Some spoke of a bloodline, a descendant, the seed of Skywalker scattered into the stars. The thought was intoxicating to many, a potential heir to Vader's legacy, a living vessel for the unspent hunger of the dark side. Others saw it as hope, a chance to continue, the line of the chosen one in light rather than shadow. But the Force itself seemed restless. In dreams, visions surfaced, a shadowed figure standing on the edge of fire and ice, a mask floating in darkness, a voice calling a name that was never fully heard. Luke himself could feel it, an unfinished thread tugging at the weave of destiny. And then there was the holocron, ancient, faceless, its origin unknown. It spoke not in certainty, but in shifting recollections, as if the story of Anakin Skywalker was a river that changed its course every time it was told. The holocron never claimed to know the truth. It only offered fragments, as though inviting the listener to fill in the missing spaces with their own shadow. Every retelling reshaped the past. Every listener, knowingly or not, bent the truth into a new form. And so the story of Anakin Skywalker remained alive, not as fact, but as an open wound the galaxy could not, or would not, allow to heal. Chapter 17 The Mask and the Manwort. Is a man without his mask? The question is older than Vader himself, yet never more haunting than when applied to him. For Anakin Skywalker, the mask was both a prison and a weapon, a cage for the broken man inside, and a symbol for the galaxy to fear. The mask was not merely durasteel and black glass. It was the Emperor's leash, the shroud over 1,000 regrets, the wall between Anakin and the world he had once sworn to protect. Behind it, his voice was a mechanized growl, stripped of warmth, transformed into an instrument of authority and terror. Without it, he was mortal again, fragile, scarred, vulnerable. And yet, the man and the mask were never separate. Even in death, the two remained entwined, each feeding the other in the minds of those who remembered him. To the rebel veterans, Vader was the mask, a monster whose shadow stretched across the stars. To the few who had known him before, the man still flickered in memory, a boy who dreamed of freeing slaves, a Jedi who smiled at the dawn. Legends grew around the remnants of his armor. Collectors and zealots scoured battlefields and black markets for any fragment, believing it to hold power. Some claimed the mask whispered in the dark, urging the listener toward rage. Others swore it was only a dead thing, its menace lingering. Not from magic, but from the truth. No one wanted to admit that the real power had never been in the steel, but in the choices left unmade. The galaxy still debates where Vader ends and Anakin begins. Perhaps there is no answer. Perhaps that is the answer. Chapter 18 The last breath began with a breath, and it ended with one. For decades, the mechanical rasp of Darth Vader's lungs had been a constant, a sound that preceded dread, a rhythm that marked the heartbeat of the Empire itself. Soldiers stood straighter when they heard it. Enemies faltered. Worlds surrendered without a shot fired, all to escape the shadow carried on that sound. And then, on the Death Star's cold floor, the rhythm broke. Anakin Skywalker's final inhale was shallow, almost reluctant, as though the body itself feared what came next. His exhale was slower still, carrying with it the weight of battles fought, crimes committed, and a lifetime's worth of chains. In that moment, the galaxy did not hear a tyrant die. It heard the last breath of a man who had once loved deeply, lost everything, and tried, in the end, to set one thing right. Beyond the veil of life, that breath did not vanish. The Force took it, folding it into its endless current. Somewhere in the eternal hum that binds all living things, the whisper of that exhale can still be felt, not as a sound, but as a ripple, like the memory of wind across an open field. The holocron's glow dims now, its story exhausted, but it does not close forever. Knowledge waits, legends wait, and breath waits too, for breath is the first and last word of every story. Someday, someone will awaken this account, seeking truth, or power, or absolution. And when they do, the tale will begin again, for no prophecy truly ends. It only pauses, holding its breath.